Welcome to this final installment of these Cold Steel 2 story summaries. We'll begin right where we left off, with the successful liberation of Trista and Thors military academy. It's about time the same is done in Heimdall, so the Civil War can finally be put to an end. Now, let's dive right in. Seeing how successful Class VII was in freeing Thors from Alliance control, the Imperial army has requested their assistance in the operation to liberate Heimdall. They are aware of the students' wish to remain a third faction in this war though, so they have a very specific plan in mind that should pose no conflict with Class VII's ideals. The Intelligence Division's captain, Lector Arundel, has the honors of explaining, now that he's back in Erebonia from his prolonged stay in Crossbell. Now that the Azure Tree has been dealt with, the threat of the Calvard Republic looms bigger than ever. It's only a matter of time before Calvard advances through Crossbell and is right on the Empire's doorstep. The Civil War must be brought to an end before a Republican invasion becomes a reality. With all of that said, Class VII is tasked with liberating the Karel Imperial Villa. The rest of Alfin's family, as well as Machias's dad and Elise, are currently imprisoned there, so there's no way the students can turn down this mission. That night, despite their big operation the next day, Rean can feel nothing but peace now that Trista has returned to the vibrant place it used to be. He joins Toa, Angie, and George for a bit up on the main school building's rooftop and tells them he has a feeling that tomorrow's operation will mark his final battle with Crow. And so, he promises that he'll drag Crow back to the academy so that the four of them can graduate together. The 3 second years are honestly doubtful at first, but Rean's sheer determination convinces them it just may be possible after all. Meanwhile, Valimar has been keeping watch over Trista's borders so that the students may focus on celebrating their reunions. He mentions to Rean that a great deal more of his memories have returned, including those of his previous awakener, the Prince Dreikels. It appears that Rean and his friends will be taking part in ending the war tomorrow, just as Dreikels had with his supporters when they marched on the capital 250 years ago. The next morning, Professor Schmidt, Instructor Makarov, and George present the finished Zemurian Oritachi to Rean and Valimar. The blade immediately begins resonating with Valimar's core, and Rean can tell that, at last, he has a chance at besting Crow. The entirety of Thor's student body, both nobles and commoners alike, gathers on the field an hour later to receive Principal Van Dyke and Princess Alfin's blessing before the monumental operation to retake Heimdall begins. Then at last, it comes time for them to set course for the Karel Imperial Villa. The 3rd and 4th Armored Divisions have begun their advance on the capital, and are met by General Le Guin and Brigadier General Bardius's forces respectively. The ensuing battle is fierce and is easily heard from inside the city proper. Despite the Alliance propaganda echoing throughout Heimdall, the citizens can't help but be roused by the sight of the Courageous soaring overhead. The ship arrives at the villa, where Group B of Thor's forces stays behind to hold off Alliance reinforcements. Rean and the rest of Group A fight their way through a number of tough guards and eventually reach the hall where Elise, Governor Regnitz, and the Emperor and Empress have been held captive. Happy reunions will have to wait, however, when Altina reveals herself. Milliam takes the opportunity to ask the girl if she's her sister, but the response she receives is vague. They are in a way, though their purposes, whatever those really are, differ. For what it's worth, Milliam and Altina discover that their model numbers are just one off from the others. Then a battle ensues. Eventually, Rean and his classmates best Altina, then brother and sister, and father and son are finally allowed a proper reunion. The rest of Class 7 arrives just in time to receive the humble gratitude of Emperor Eugent. As for Prince Cedric's odd absence, Altina reveals that he's been taken to the palace to be used in a ritual. Fee and Milliam attempt to trap the Black Rabbit to get more info out of her, but an ominous chanting begins echoing from above them. Emma recognizes it as the Hexen clan's most forbidden incantation, one that will revive the Vermilion despair from 250 years ago. We see Vita ushering in the ritual from aboard the Pantagruel, while the Divine Knight in the palace's depths comes to life behind a blindfolded and terrified Prince Cedric. The entirety of Heimdall is bathed in an ominous red, as the palace itself is transformed into the otherworldly Infernal Castle, just as the Black Records have described. Before she heads off to grant her own wish, Vita asks Rufus if he'd like to join the rest of them in the castle. He politely turns down her offer and oddly boards his own private ship once she teleports away. Apparently, he has other matters to take care of. Back at the villa, Altina makes her escape while Class 7 is distracted by the crazy things that have just happened. Captain Claire arrives to escort the Emperor and Empress to safety away from the city, while Machias's dad makes arrangements for City Hall in order to fulfill his responsibility as governor of Heimdall. Acting Captain Toa begins making plans to use the Courageous to evacuate the citizens, but that's when Rean says he must enter the castle, since he can sense that Crow is there. He's prepared to go alone, but it should come as no surprise by this point when all of Rean's friends firmly announce they'll be coming with him. They're also Crow's classmates after all. And despite Rean's protests, Elise is granted her wish of watching over him and everyone else from aboard the Courageous. With that, the high-speed cruiser takes off for the Infernal Castle. Reminiscent of the chase between the Arcee and the Glorious in Sky SC, the Courageous must outmaneuver the missiles launched from its much larger adversary, the Pantagruel. And though magic knights materialize right in front of the castle, Patrick and Celestin assure Class 7 that their group will handle these ancient foes. Even instructors Makarov and Thomas lend their skills in this dire situation. Rean and his classmates disembark the Courageous and enter the massive tower. When they reach the end of the first stratum, the students find their way barred by Blablanc and Duvally the Swift. Duvally attempts to rile Laura once again by belittling the Arcade school, but Laura is nothing but honorable in her response. The Arcade can see that Duvally is a powerful swordswoman and would be honored to challenge her so that they both may ascend to greater heights. The battle commences, with Class 7 the apparent victors by just a hair. Though that's before Duvally goes absolutely berserk. The knight demonstrates she's not called the Swift for nothing, and has the entire party cornered in just an instant. To add to this, Blablanc is raring to keep going as well, but that's when this entire exchange is interrupted by a flurry of rose petals. Powerful arts follow, then it's revealed that both Prince Olivert and Toval, some way, somehow, have arrived to bail them out. Back outside, Mueller's arrival grants the Thors forces some much-needed breathing room from the never-ending onslaught of magic knights. The Vander is reunited with an old friend when instructor Neidhart also jumps in to assist them. Having completely forgotten about Class 7 now that his rival is here, Reupload can't help but gleefully engage in an arts-casting battle with Olivert and Toval, which leaves an utterly dismayed Duvally when the students sneak by to the elevator. Class 7 proceeds and eventually reaches some massive doors with the Zephyr logo painted on them. No surprise that Zeno and Lennyoh are their next opponents. Fee demands answers from them about why she was left behind a year ago, and finally learns the truth, that her Jaeger family was simply following the Jaeger King's will. He told them before his final duel with the War God that, if he were to lose his life there, he wanted Fee out of the Corps for good. Turns out he never approved of her joining the Jaeger lifestyle in the first place. The Jaeger King's foresight extended even further than Sarah could have imagined, since he tasked Zeno and Lennyoh with making sure the Purple Lightning found Fee after he heard that the guild had caught wind of the scheduled duel. After all these revelations, Fee reflects on how she was always the one having to be looked after and protected while she was still in the Corps. And if it wasn't for Sarah, she would have completely lost her way in life. But ever since coming to the academy, she's slowly learned to stand on her own 2 feet with the help of her new friends. She was able to take back everything she lost during the Civil War via her own efforts. And if it's to protect her Class 7 family, she'll continue to push herself to get stronger. But despite their best efforts, things really start looking bad for the students when the Jaegers summon their war cry ability. Though this time, Sharon and Claire show up to bail the party out. Before the elevator heads up to the next stratum, Zeno tells Fee that the other Corps members are all acting separately right now to bring back the boss. She's obviously shaken by this news, wondering what they could possibly even mean by that. But she and her classmates must press on.
And finally, the last one standing in their way is McBurn, Enforcer number 1, the Almighty Conflagration. The only reason he's here right now is to have an opportunity to fight Rean and Valimar, but unfortunately for him, Rean needs to save his Divine Knight's mana for the battle against Crow. McBurn ends up changing his tune in the end when the kids actually put up a decent fight during their little warm-up session. Now he wants to see just how hot they can make him, and proceeds to show them a taste of his blazing demon form. He starts swinging his fire left and right, he starts pressuring Rean into calling in Valibro, but just when he can do so, that's when Daddy Arcade comes in to save the day! The appearance of the Radiant Blade Master himself psychs up McBurn so much, he pulls out the otherworldly demon blade called Ongbar. The ensuing blows between the two men are absolutely insane, as if it's a clash between the gods themselves. Class 7 takes the opportunity created by Victor to escape to the elevator, while they leave the Arcade Master to the blazing demon himself. It's here at last that Rean and the others reach the highest point in the castle, the Vermilion Throne, where Crow and Vita have been expecting them. Though the Azure Awakener commends his younger classmates' accomplishments throughout the war, they're simply naive to think that they'll be successful here. No matter how much they wish for it, there's no chance of him ever returning to Thors. Vita disagrees with him though, much to everyone's surprise. After all, these are those who continue to forge ahead, even when confronted with impossible odds. Each member of Class 7 echoes their statement, all of which finally begins chipping away at Crow's tough act. Duke Cayenne's impatient clapping interrupts the moment though. He has his own dreams to achieve, one that he will fulfill in his ancestor's place, the Emperor Orthros Raisei Arner. 250 years prior, Emperor Orthros and his cursed Vermilion Knight, Testarossa, were responsible for countless calamities before the latter was sealed away by the then Prince Drykles and the Lance Maiden. Though the Cayenne family are descendants of Orthros, the Duke laments that he's not of full Arner blood, meaning he won't be able to pilot the Vermilion Knight himself. Instead, he'll just have to guide Cedric while the Crown Prince does so in his place. Once the Duke's long spiel is over, he's met with a withering response from Rean. The teen frankly couldn't care less about the Duke's dream. All he cares about is the fact that Class 7 promised Alfin and Olivert they'd rescue Cedric. Crow and Vita don't plan to make that easy for them though. Withholding using Ordine in this first round, Crow challenges all of Class 7 to battle, while Vita asks Emma in particular to give it everything she has. Rean and his classmates ultimately prove their mettle against such powerful adversaries. Then the real moment of truth dawns when Crow challenges Rean to their final Divine Knight duel, the battle that's been building up towards the entire game. No one is allowed to interfere as both fight until their souls burn out and as the battle progresses. Crow is honestly proud to see Rean's full potential at last, now that the latter has a true Zemurian Oritachi, but eventually a victor emerges when Rean officially disarms Crow. Duke Cayenne is furious at the sentimental celebrations that follows and decides to take matters into his own hands. He forcibly throws Prince Cedric to the dormant and cursed night, which begins reviving once more as the Vermilion Apocalypse. The situation outside worsens as the calamity siphons mana from the entirety of Heimdall. Countless members of citizens drop unconscious, though when it comes to the students of Thors, they're fortunate that Instructor Thomas is with them, of all people. He becomes uncharacteristically serious and directs all of them to focus their energy to avoid the red glow's effects. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Class 7 must team up with Crow and Vita to stop this before it's too late. The latter two combine their power to create an opening for Class 7, then the students go to battle against the Vermilion Apocalypse's first phase. They whittle down the boss through this, and a subsequent phase as they wait for Valimar and Ordine's mana levels to replenish. The two Divine Knights do so just in time, then Rean and Crow fight together to save the prince and put an end to this menace. In the process of creating an opening for Rean, the Azure Awakener and Ordine take a devastating blow. Crow insists it's just a scratch and urges Rean to prioritize rescuing Prince Cedric. Doing so puts an end to the Vermilion Apocalypse, though achieving all of this was not without its sacrifice. Crow actually sustained a fatal wound to the heart, and even Vita knows that her witchcraft is of no use here. Emma attempts it anyway, but all it does is buy Crow enough time to give each person a final goodbye. Lastly, he urges them all to keep going forward relentlessly, without looking back. In the meantime, the asshole Cayenne has taken Cedric hostage, so Vita prepares to recover the prince, when out of nowhere, Rufus Alborea charges in, slicing Griana's completely in two and successfully disarms the powerful witch. Everyone fails to comprehend what's going on since Rufus isn't here on the Duke's behalf. In fact, Duke Cayenne is restrained by Altina and is placed officially under arrest by the Alborea. Vita already knew there was something suspicious about him, but couldn't piece the answer together until now. It's then that Rufus finally reveals a shocking plot twist. He was the Ironblood's primary member all this time. This news comes as a surprise to even Lecter and Claire, as they only knew a primary member existed but were never told who this person was. This isn't the only shocking reveal, however, as the Blood and Iron Chancellor Gileath Osborne himself makes his grand entrance. The Chancellor directly addresses Vita when he announces he'll be taking over the Society's Phantasmal Blaze plan and has direct control of the Black Workshop. He even lets her escape with her life this time, giving her a message to take back with her. That he'll crush Ouroboros under his heel if they try to stop him. Injured and unable to do anything at this moment, Vita asks Class 7 to take care of Crow for her before vanishing. Milliam awkwardly rushes off to join the other Ironbloods right as Osborne assigns Rufus the task of moving forward with the occupation of Crossbell. Hearing those words only reminds Rean of everything Crow told him about his past and all the years he spent making preparations to assassinate Osborne. The Ashen Awakener rushes forward, grabs the Iron Blood and Chancellor by the collar, and furiously asks him why he's still alive. Did Crow's life mean nothing? As if things couldn't get any worse, that's when Rean remembers the final bombshell, that Osborne is his true biological father. And it's upon this revelation that Osborne says how proud he is to see his son grow strong and healthy, and gives Rean his official title as the Ashen Chevalier.
We fast forward all the way to March, where the 9th Armored Division is fending off the Calvardians' advance at the latter's Crossbellian border. Erebonia launched its invasion of Crossbell in January and seized control in only a single day without any bloodshed. Since then, the Republic has spent countless attempts to drive the Empire out, but the Panzer Soldats continue to stun with their advanced technology. It's Rean's Divine Knight in particular that truly halts Calvard in their tracks each time. And thanks to Osborne, Rean is now known across the continent as the Ashen Chevalier, the savior who liberated Heimdall and brought an end to the Civil War. This day in March, the new Erebonian rulers of Crossbell give a rousing speech from Orcus Tower. Chancellor Osborne assures Crossbell that they're forgiven for the destruction of Garrelia Fortress. The Empire has graciously chosen to put the past behind them. Then Rufus is introduced as the first Governor-General of Crossbell and proceeds to announce the official annexation of the city into the Erebonian Empire. Down in the geofront, at one of the terminals, Sal notifies Lloyd and Regia that they won't have to worry about any guards in this last stretch of this urgent operation. The detective and assassin team up and fight their way through the geofront E sector to a terminal further in. We learn from Lloyd that the Empire began surveillance on Randy first, then expanded their watch to Ellie and Noel. It's only thanks to Tio that Lloyd and Kia have managed to escape detection so far. And speaking of the former Zero child, she's actually under the protection of Arios at this moment. Once they're a little further in, Regia picks up on some powerful presence nearby, but can only describe it in vague terms. That poses no problem for Lloyd, since he remembers all the times Regia's gut feelings have saved him in the past. He places a lot of weight on her warning, so the two carefully proceed towards the Geofront's central terminal. They make it at last, and Lloyd immediately hooks up the device Chief Roberts and Yona prepared that will extract all the sensitive personal data of Crossbellians that is stored on the Orbital Net. They absolutely can't let the Imperial Army get their hands on this information. Lloyd and Regia can finally breathe a sigh of relief, though the moment is short-lived due to Rean and Altina's sudden arrival. Though they were once adversaries, Rean and Altina are now working together on order of the Imperial government. Speaking of orders, Rean is apologetic, but knows he must stop the data from leaving this room. And so, Lloyd and Regia are forced to fend off the two Erebonians just long enough for the data transfer to finish. The battle drags on for too long, so Altina advises Rean to unleash his full power. But since the transfer ends up finishing before Rean can use spirit unification, he instead calls upon Valimar. The Divine Knight destroys the entire terminal much to Lloyd's dismay, though the Ashen Chevalier does allow him and Regia to take the device containing all the information. Obviously intrigued by Rean's small mercy, the detective officially introduces himself as Lloyd Bannings, then asks our Cold Steel protag if he could do the same. Taken by surprise, Rean nearly says he's part of Thors Academy's Class 7, before catching himself. He identifies himself as a provisional officer with the Crossbell government. Regia and Lloyd try to make sense of Rean's Divine Knight and what it could possibly be, but all they can say for certain is that it was unbelievably powerful. Good old Lloyd Banning strikes again though, since he imparts some encouraging words to Regia, that they'll all get over the barrier if they continue to work together with their friends. Back in the terminal room, Rean gazes longingly in the direction in which the other two left. He says he can't help but feel a bit jealous of them. Then with that, the Divertissement in Crossbell is brought to a close. We've now arrived at the epilogue of Cold Steel 2. Rean arrives back in Trista, where he's greeted by Captain Claire. Though she's happy to see he's back safe and sound, his response is more than a little standoffish. He finally gets the chance to ask her if she really didn't know anything about Osborne being his real father. Claire admits she only had a suspicion, but no hard evidence to confirm it. She reaches for Rean as he turns to leave, but stops herself and whispers that wasn't the only reason she was worried about him. Rean gets stuck in his own head after exiting the train station, realizing just how different things are now compared to the last time he was in Trista. But the sound of very familiar voices snap him out of it. He turns and finds that all his friends have come out, during class hours no less, to welcome him back. Despite a number of Class 7 wanting to skip straight to celebrating Rean's return, the teen actually wants to attend class, probably wishing to feel just like a regular teenage student again. The days begin to whiz past as Rean cherishes each moment with Class 7 he has left. It turns out that all his classmates have been taking in an accelerated curriculum during his time away since they're all preparing to graduate this year. The war really did change them and has helped each and every one of them realize what they truly want to pursue in their lives. Their final days together as a class are especially poignant with Crow's permanent absence. Angie and George have big things planned for the coming year as well. Angie wants to get out and see the world by traveling across the entirety of Zemuria, while George has his eyes set on visiting all the major engineering factories in the continent, starting with the ZCF, then the Epstein Foundation, then the Verne Company. And yes, he plans to find some way to get to that last one, despite it being in Calvard. Lastly, the both of them know Rean is feeling guilty about his role in the occupation of Crossbow. Since they know telling him he shouldn't feel guilty would do little to help, at the very least, the two remind him that he has friends who understand why he did what he did. As a farewell for now present from them, Angie and George continue making final adjustments to the Orbital bike so they can give it to Rean after they graduate.
Resembling a scene from earlier in the year, Rean drops in on Toa after she's fallen asleep by accident. She notices he really doesn't look good once she awakens, though he tries to brush it off. She knows he's a boy and all, and that he's grown so much during the Civil War, but that doesn't mean he has to bottle things up and never allow himself to let things out. It's after Toa says this that Rean finally breaks down in tears. He apologizes for failing to bring back Crow, especially after he promised he'd do so for his upperclassmen. Rean has nothing to apologize for, of course, and Toa comforts him and is just grateful that he tried his absolute best for their sake. Once he's regained his composure, Rean learns from Toa that she's planning to work with a bunch of different NGOs from a variety of fields after graduation. She feels like doing so is the best way to educate herself and see how she can best serve the country going forward. This is how Toa's decided to spend this next year, even though she is highly sought after for employment purposes by basically everyone, even the Imperial government. As for the last free day of the year, tomorrow, she originally wasn't going to prepare any tasks for Rean, but does so in the end upon his request. Rean helps out with a variety of memorable quests the next day, like helping Annabelle and the Lake Lords sort out their arranged marriage issues via none else than a fishing competition, and also witnessing some amusing matchmaking play out between Anton and Sharon. Patrick challenges Rean to a duel and officially makes up for his disgraceful behavior back in CS1 when he honorably concedes after losing this time around. And of course, the old schoolhouse just couldn't leave Class 7 alone today, since it's already been such a huge part of their previous free days. The bell begins tolling again, just as it did the night before the school festival. Class 7 aren't the only ones who show up this time, but Toval, Sharon, Claire, and even Princess Elfin and Elise just happen to be visiting Rean today. Before we move on, I must mention a very important scene that's locked behind New Game Plus. Class 7 comes across Rosine and Instructor Thomas up on the school rooftop, where the latter has some odd things to say about the old schoolhouse, not to mention the strange documents he's been deciphering for Rean throughout the game. Then, with a snap of his fingers, the instructor creates a partition, or an area that he makes privy only to Rosine and Rean. Thomas actually serves as the second dominion of the Gralsritter, and Rosine is his squire. Those black records that we've been finding actually contain historical records of the Divine Knights, and since Rean's an Awakener, they've wanted to contact him in their true identities for a while now. They extend their help to the Ashen Awakener with anything related to these kinds of things in the future, and ask that he keep them posted with any related updates that may come his way. This full scene is no longer than 10 minutes, and a link to it can be found in the cards above if you're interested. Just saying, this stuff plays a really important role in CS3 onwards. When they enter the old schoolhouse, they find that its entire interior has changed once more. Valimar shares that, like the spirit shrines, this place and its Awakener trial was built by the gnomes. Everything is tied to the Great One, such as the final opponent they faced back in CS1, which was the shadow of the Great One. Class 7 must overcome various cryptids in their efforts to stop this strange phenomena, and eventually find themselves entering that vast battlefield once more. Instead of the Great Black Shadow from last time, a Great White Shadow calling itself Loa Lucifera appears before them. When the Infernal Castle appeared, it caused a great disruption to the septium veins, so much so that it reached even this place. Thus, a trial that was never supposed to be unearthed ended up becoming so. This makes challenging Loa Lucifera hollow and meaningless, but Rean and the others don't care. In fact, this actually provides a fitting last challenge for their class as a whole. That's all they need to make earning a victory here have meaning. Everyone fights their hearts out and eventually defeat Loa Lucifera together. Then, amidst the beautiful white specks floating around, it finally hits all of them that this is the end of Class 7. And even though she joined later than everyone else, Milliam definitely made priceless memories this year. For the first time in her life, she begins to cry, which ends up unleashing the waterworks of each student one by one. Lastly, Crow's spirit is seen watching over them all. We fast forward to graduation day, where everyone minus Rean is preparing to board the train towards their future endeavors. Fitting for this season of endings and new beginnings, the Lennyoh flowers are in full bloom and are carried away in the breeze. It's here that Instructor Sarah is brought to tears after being caught completely off guard when all her students bow and thank her in unison for all she's taught them this past year. Then, with a final parting wave, Gaius, Eustace, Laura, Milliam, Sarah, Fee, Machias, Elliot, Emma and Celine, and Elisa and Sharon depart for the platform, leaving Rean to return to the academy. And that's a wrap on Cold Steel 2. Thanks for your patience with me since this finale has come out a lot later than I'd originally planned. Yeah, sorry. Shoutouts to Lennyoh and February Night though for helping me narrate parts of this video. Feb has some great Kiseki content on YouTube, including all of Hajimari with English subtitles, and they both stream the Trails games as well. Links to their channels will be in the description. I also want to thank all my patrons, especially Jared Breland, Andreas Hansen, Captain Hobo, and Philip C. for all their support. Join the Discord if you want a cool place to hang out with other Trails, Persona, and other Japanese media-loving fans, and thanks for watching. Until next time, take care. See ya!